In 1906, a young couple stood before a church in rural Pennsylvania, their smiles bright with the promise of a future together. The photographer captured what should have been a perfect moment until the glass revealed something impossible, a face that shouldn't exist, a reflection with no source. What began as a celebration would become a haunting that neither time nor reason could explain. If you enjoy mysteries that blur the line between reality and the unexplainable, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. The morning of June 3rd, 1906 arrived with unseasonable warmth in the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. Sarah Whitmore stood before the mirror in her family's modest farmhouse, her hands trembling as her mother fastened the last pearl button on her wedding dress. The fabric, though simple, caught the light streaming through the window, and for a moment, Sarah allowed herself to believe that everything would be perfect. "You look beautiful, dear," her mother whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thomas is a lucky man." Sarah smiled, though something had been gnawing at her all morning, a sensation she couldn't quite name, a heaviness in the air, like the moments before a thunderstorm. She pushed the feeling aside. This was her wedding day. There was no room for melancholy or superstition. Downstairs, her father waited with the carriage. The journey to St. Michael's Church took 20 minutes along dirt roads that wound through farmland and forest. Sarah watched the landscape pass, noting how the trees seemed darker than usual, their shadows stretching long despite the morning sun. Her father hummed an old tune, oblivious to her unease. St. Michael's stood on a hill overlooking the town, its white-clapboard walls and modest steeple a beacon for the community. The church had served Millbrook for nearly 50 years, witnessing countless baptisms, weddings and funerals. Sarah had attended services there since childhood, finding comfort in its familiar pews and the gentle voice of Reverend Morton. Thomas Callahan waited at the altar, his dark suit pressed and his sandy hair combed back with pomade. When Sarah appeared in the doorway, his face transformed with genuine joy. Whatever doubts had plagued her that morning evaporated at the sight of him. Thomas was steady, kind, and devoted. Everything she could want in a husband. The ceremony proceeded without incident. Reverend Morton's words echoed through the small sanctuary as sunlight filtered through the plain glass windows. Sarah's younger sister, Emma, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Thomas's brother, Robert, stood as best man, grinning broadly. When Thomas slipped the simple gold band onto Sarah's finger, she felt a surge of relief. They had done it. They were married. After the ceremony, as guests filed out to prepare for the reception at the Whitmore farm, Thomas suggested they capture the moment with a photograph. He had hired Mr. Heinrich Vogel, a German immigrant who had recently opened a photography studio in town. Vogel's reputation for quality work had spread quickly, and Thomas wanted only the best for their wedding portrait. Vogel set up his camera on the church steps, his movements practiced and efficient. He was a tall man with sharp features and penetrating grey eyes that seemed to assess everything with professional precision. His assistant, a young man named Peter, helped position the heavy tripod and prepared the glass plate. "Stand here, please," Vogel instructed in his thick accent, gesturing to a spot directly in front of the church's main entrance. "The light is perfect. You will have a beautiful photograph." Sarah and Thomas positioned themselves as directed. Behind them, the church door stood partially open, its glass panels reflecting the afternoon sky. Thomas wrapped his arm around Sarah's waist, and she leaned into him, their happiness genuine and unguarded. "Very good," Vogel said, disappearing beneath the black cloth. "Now remain very still. Do not move for 30 seconds. The seconds stretched. Sarah focused on keeping her smile natural while fighting the urge to blink or shift her weight. She could feel Thomas's warmth beside her, smell the faint scent of his cologne. The church door creaked slightly in the breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed. "Excellent," Vogel announced, emerging from beneath the cloth. "The photograph is complete. You will have it in 1 week's time." Sarah exhaled, not realizing she had been holding her breath. Thomas squeezed her hand, and they descended the steps to join their guests. The rest of the day passed in a blur of celebration. Cake, laughter, music, and dancing that lasted until twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. That night, as Sarah and Thomas prepared to leave for their brief honeymoon in Philadelphia, Emma pulled her sister aside. "Sarah," she said quietly, "did you see anyone else at the church when you were taking the photograph?" "What do you mean?" "I don't know. I was watching from the side, and for just a moment I thought I saw someone standing in the doorway behind you. But when I looked again, no one was there." Sarah felt that familiar unease return, the same sensation from that morning. "You must have been mistaken. Everyone was already at the farm by then." Emma nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "You're probably right. It was just the light playing tricks. If you're enjoying this story so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps so much, and I read every comment." 1 week later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Thomas collected the photograph from Vogel's studio. The photographer had been unusually quiet when Thomas arrived, his normally brisk demeanor replaced by something more contemplative. "Your photograph, Mr. Callahan," Vogel said, sliding a wrapped package across the counter. His fingers lingered on the edge for a moment. "I trust you will be pleased with the quality." Thomas thanked him and left, eager to show Sarah the result. They had moved into a small house on the edge of town, a wedding gift from Sarah's parents. It needed work. The roof leaked in one corner, and the kitchen stove was temperamental, but it was theirs. Sarah was hanging curtains when Thomas burst through the door, the package in his hands. "It's here," he announced, his enthusiasm infectious. They sat together at the kitchen table, and Thomas carefully unwrapped the photograph. The image was remarkably clear, the detail impressive even by modern standards. There they stood, young and radiant, frozen in a moment of perfect happiness. The church behind them was crisp and well-defined, every board and window visible. Sarah's smile faded. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "look at the door." In the glass panel of the church door, barely visible but unmistakably present, was a face. Not a reflection of anyone standing nearby, the angle would have been wrong for that, but a pale, distinct face appearing to look directly at the camera. The features were blurred but clear enough to make out. Hollow eyes, a slack mouth, and an expression that could only be described as watching. Thomas leaned closer, his jaw tightening. "That's impossible. We were alone." "Emma said she saw someone," Sarah said, her hands trembling. "When we were posing, she said she thought someone was in the doorway, but when she looked again, they were gone." They examined the photograph in different light, from different angles, hoping it was merely a trick of the development process or a flaw in the glass plate. But the face remained, undeniable and disturbing. "We should ask Vogel about it," Thomas said finally. "Perhaps there's an explanation, something technical." The next morning, they returned to the studio. Vogel listened to their concerns with a grave expression, then studied the photograph under a magnifying glass. When he looked up, his face had paled. "I have developed hundreds of photographs," he said slowly. "I have seen many strange things, double exposures, light leaks, chemical errors. This is none of those things." "Then what is it?" Sarah demanded. Vogel hesitated. "I do not believe in ghosts, Mrs. Callahan. I am a man of science and reason, but I cannot explain this image. The face in the glass, it should not be there. And yet it is." He paused, then added quietly, "There is something else. When I was developing this plate in the dark room, I had the strongest sensation that someone was watching me. I turned several times, certain I would find someone behind me, but I was alone. I've never experienced such a thing before." Thomas and Sarah exchanged glances. The unease that had plagued Sarah on her wedding morning now felt like a weight pressing on both of them. "Have there been any incidents at St. Michael's?" Thomas asked. "Anything unusual in the church's history?" Vogel shook his head. "I am relatively new to Millbrook. I would not know such things, but Reverend Morton has been here for many years. Perhaps he could tell you. They thanked Vogel and left the studio, the photograph now feeling like evidence of something they couldn't yet name. The walk to St. Michael's took 15 minutes, and with each step, Sarah felt her dread growing. The church that had been such a familiar, comforting presence throughout her life now seemed foreign and ominous. Reverend Morton was in his office, preparing Sunday's sermon. He was a kindly man in his 60s, with white hair and gentle eyes that crinkled when he smiled. But when Thomas showed him the photograph and explained their concerns, his expression grew serious. "May I?" he asked, reaching for the image. He studied it for a long moment, then set it down carefully on his desk. "I had hoped this would remain buried," he said finally. "What would remain buried?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. The Reverend sighed deeply. St. Michael's was built in 1856 on land donated by the Ashford family. They were among the town's founders, wealthy landowners who made their fortune in timber. The church was built on the site of their original family home, which had burned down in 1854. He paused, as if gathering strength to continue. The fire killed 3 people, Jonathan Ashford, his wife Margaret, and their teenage daughter Rebecca. Only their son, William, survived. He went on to donate the land for the church, saying it was what his parents would have wanted. Thomas frowned. "But what does that have to do with our photograph?" "Rebecca Ashford was engaged to be married when she died," Reverend Morton said quietly. "The wedding was scheduled for June 4th, 1854. She died the night before, trapped in her bedroom when the fire broke out. According to the accounts I've read, she was found still wearing her wedding dress." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "June 4th. We were married on June 3rd. "Yes," the Reverend confirmed. "And if I'm not mistaken, you were married at almost the exact age Rebecca was when she died. 19, correct?" Sarah nodded mutely. "Leave a comment below about what you think is happening in this story so far." The revelation about Rebecca Ashford consumed Sarah and Thomas over the following days. They couldn't shake the image of a young woman, dressed for her wedding, dying in flames just hours before she was meant to begin her new life. The parallel to their own situation felt too specific to be coincidence. Thomas, ever practical, tried to find rational explanations. Perhaps the face in the photograph was simply a flaw in the glass, and the timing was unfortunate synchronicity. But even as he voiced these theories, he could see Sarah's skepticism and felt his own doubts growing. Sarah began having dreams. In them, she walked through a burning house, flames licking at the walls while she searched desperately for something she couldn't name. Sometimes, she heard a voice calling, though she could never make out the words. She would wake, gasping, her nightgown drenched in sweat, while Thomas held her and whispered reassurances that felt increasingly hollow. 3 days after their visit to Reverend Morton, Emma came to call. She arrived unannounced, her face drawn with worry. "I need to tell you something," she said without preamble. "Something I didn't mention before because I thought I was being foolish." They sat in the parlor, and Emma twisted her hands in her lap. "At the wedding reception, I met an old woman I'd never seen before. She was standing at the edge of the yard, watching the celebration, but not participating. I asked Mother who she was, but Mother said she didn't see anyone where I was pointing." Sarah felt her stomach clench. "What did she look like?" "Elderly, with white hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a black dress, very old-fashioned, Victorian era, I would say. She was staring at you, Sarah, the whole time. And when I approached to ask if she needed anything, she spoke to me." "What did she say?" Emma's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "She said, 'The girl in the glass knows what she wants. She's been waiting so long.' Then she turned and walked toward the woods, and I lost sight of her." Thomas stood abruptly and began pacing. "This is madness. Ghosts aren't real. There has to be a reasonable explanation for all of this." "Then, explain the photograph," Sarah challenged. "Explain the dreams I've been having. Explain why Emma saw someone that no one else could see." Unable to answer, Thomas suggested they visit the town's historical society. If there was more to learn about the Ashford family and the fire, records would exist. Perhaps understanding the full story would help them make sense of what was happening. The Historical Society occupied a small building near the town square, managed by an elderly historian named Gerald Pemberton. He greeted them warmly and listened with interest as they explained their research into the Ashford fire. "Ah, yes, tragic business that was," Pemberton said, leading them to a filing cabinet. "One of the worst disasters in Millbrook's early history. The fire was so intense, it consumed the entire house in under an hour." He produced a folder containing newspaper clippings, letters, and official documents. Thomas and Sarah pored over the materials, piecing together the story of that terrible night. The fire had started around midnight, its cause never conclusively determined. Some suspected a knocked-over lantern. Others whispered about more sinister origins. Jonathan Ashford had made enemies in his business dealings, and rumors of arson circulated for years, though nothing was ever proven. But it was a letter tucked at the bottom of the folder that made Sarah's hands shake. Written by William Ashford to a friend 3 months after the fire, it detailed his sister's final hours. "Rebecca had seemed troubled all day," William wrote. "She kept saying she felt as though something terrible was going to happen, though she couldn't explain what. At dinner, she barely touched her food. Mother attributed it to wedding jitters, but I knew my sister. This was different. She was terrified of something, though she wouldn't say what." The letter continued. "In the days before the fire, Rebecca confided in me that she had been having dreams. In them, she saw herself walking down the aisle of a church, not the one where her wedding was planned, but a different one that didn't yet exist. She said she could see other brides there, women from different times, all walking toward something she couldn't see. She felt as though she was meant to join them somehow, though she didn't understand how or why." Sarah set the letter down, her voice shaking. "Thomas, I've been having the same dreams. I walk into a church I don't recognize, and I see women in wedding dresses from different eras. They're all walking toward the altar, but when I try to follow them, I wake up." Pemberton, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "There's something else you should know. The land where St. Michael's now stands was considered cursed by the native tribes who originally inhabited this area. They believed it was a place where the boundary between worlds was thin. They wouldn't build there or allow their dead to be buried there." "Why didn't anyone mention this before?" Thomas demanded. "Because by the time St. Michael's was built, those stories had been largely forgotten or dismissed as superstition. The Ashford family either didn't know or didn't care. They built their home there because it was the highest point in the area, with beautiful views." Thomas ran his hands through his hair. "So what are we dealing with? A curse? A haunting? What does Rebecca Ashford want from us?" Pemberton shook his head slowly. "I don't think she wants anything from you, Mr. Callahan. I think she's trying to tell you something, or warn you about something. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything." That evening, Sarah insisted they return to St. Michael's. Despite Thomas's protests, she felt an overwhelming compulsion to visit the church at night, to stand where she had stood for the photograph and try to understand what was happening to them. They arrived just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of crimson and orange. The church stood silent on its hill, its white walls glowing in the fading light. Thomas had brought a lantern, and they climbed the steps slowly, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The door was unlocked. Reverend Morton never locked it, believing a church should always be open to those in need. They stepped inside, and Sarah immediately felt the temperature drop. Her breath formed small clouds in the air, though the evening was warm. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. Thomas nodded, his jaw set. They moved down the center aisle toward the altar, the lantern casting dancing shadows on the walls. As they reached the front pew, Sarah stopped abruptly. "There," she said, pointing to a section of the floor near the altar. "That board looks different from the others." Thomas knelt and examined the floorboard Sarah had indicated. It was slightly darker than those surrounding it, and when he pressed on it, it shifted slightly. Using his pocket knife, he pried it up, revealing a small space beneath. Inside was a metal box, its surface corroded with age. Thomas lifted it carefully and set it on the pew. The lock had rusted away, and the lid opened with minimal effort. Inside were letters, photographs, and a journal. The photographs showed a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Sarah. The same dark hair, the same delicate features, the same slight build. Rebecca Ashford. Sarah picked up the journal with trembling hands and began to read by lantern light. The entries started optimistically, filled with excitement about Rebecca's upcoming wedding to a young man named David Morrison. But as the wedding date approached, the tone shifted dramatically. "I have been having the most terrible dreams," Rebecca wrote 3 weeks before her death. "In them, I see myself at the church, but it's not the church where David and I are meant to wed. It's a different building, standing on the hill where our house now sits. I see other women there, women from times not yet come, all in wedding dresses. And I see flames, always flames." The entries grew increasingly desperate. Rebecca began experiencing what she called visions, moments when she would seem to see the future overlaid on the present. She described seeing a white church on the hill, seeing couples being married there, seeing a specific young woman who looked like her mirror image. "I told Mother about the visions," one entry read, "but she says I am simply nervous about the wedding. But I know what I see. I know there is something wrong with this land, with this place. The dreams are warnings, but I don't know how to heed them. I love David, but I fear that our marriage will never come to pass." The final entry was dated June 3rd, 1854, the day before the fire. "It is happening tonight. I don't know how I know, but I do. I have tried to warn Father, to tell him we must leave the house, but he thinks I am hysterical. I have hidden this journal and my letters from David beneath the floorboards, in the spot where I see the future church's altar standing. Perhaps someday someone will find them. Perhaps she will find them, the girl who looks like me, the one from my visions. If you are reading this, then you know. You have seen me in the glass. I am trapped between moments, unable to move forward or back. The fire will come and I will die, but some part of me will remain, watching, waiting, trying to warn others. The land is cursed. It feeds on hope and joy, on moments of perfect happiness. Do not let it take yours as it took mine." Sarah dropped the journal, tears streaming down her face. Thomas wrapped his arms around her, but she could feel him shaking too. "We have to leave," Sarah said. "We have to leave Millbrook. This house, this town. We can't stay here." "Sarah, that's insane. We can't uproot our entire lives because of a journal written 50 years ago by a girl who died in a fire. She knew about me, Thomas. She saw me in her visions. She's been trying to warn us. Don't you see? This isn't about haunting or revenge. She's trying to save us from whatever happened to her." Before Thomas could respond, the church bells began to toll, though no one was ringing them. The sound was deafening, and both of them clapped their hands over their ears. The lantern's flame flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. In that darkness, Sarah saw her, Rebecca Ashford, standing at the altar, her wedding dress charred and smoking, her face pale as death. But her expression wasn't angry or malevolent. It was desperate, pleading. "Go!" Rebecca's voice echoed through the church, though her lips didn't move. "Leave this place. The land demands its due, and it will take everything if you let it." Light flooded the church as suddenly as it had vanished. Rebecca was gone. The bells had stopped. Sarah and Thomas stood in stunned silence, the journal and letters scattered at their feet. "We're leaving," Thomas said finally, his voice hoarse. "Tomorrow. We'll go to Philadelphia, to Boston, anywhere but here." Sarah nodded, but even as they gathered the items and fled the church, she couldn't shake the feeling that leaving wouldn't be enough. Rebecca's warning echoed in her mind. The land demands its due. They didn't sleep that night. Instead, Sarah and Thomas packed what they could carry, making plans to leave Millbrook at first light. Thomas sent a telegram to his uncle in Philadelphia, asking if they could stay with him while they found their footing. Sarah wrote letters to her parents and Emma, trying to explain their sudden departure without revealing the full truth. But as dawn broke, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, Sarah knew something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy with an invisible pressure that made it difficult to breathe. When she looked out the window, she saw smoke rising from the direction of town. "Thomas," she called, her voice tight with fear. He joined her at the window, and together they watched as more smoke appeared, dark columns rising against the morning sky. The church bell began to toll, not the chaotic supernatural ringing from the night before, but the steady, measured tolling that signaled disaster. They rushed into town to find that 3 buildings had caught fire during the night: the mercantile, the blacksmith's shop, and the boarding house. No one had been killed, but dozens were now homeless. The fires had started simultaneously with no apparent cause. The town was in chaos. Reverend Morton found them in the crowd and pulled them aside, his face ashen. "This is connected to what you discovered," he said quietly. "I've been doing research since you came to see me. There's a pattern. Every 50 years, something terrible happens in Millbrook. In 1854, the Ashford Fire. In 1804, a barn collapse during a wedding reception killed 12 people. In 1754, a smallpox outbreak began on the day of the town founder's daughter's wedding." "What are you saying?" Thomas demanded. "I'm saying the land remembers, and every 50 years, on or around June 3rd, it demands payment." Joy turned to ashes. Celebration turned to mourning. Sarah felt her knees weaken. "It's 1906. 52 years since Rebecca died, and we were married on June 3rd. "But we're leaving," Thomas protested. "We're already packed. We'll be gone within the hour." Reverend Morton shook his head slowly. "I don't think it works that way. I think the land has already marked you. The fires last night, they started in buildings where wedding gifts for you were stored. Your parents kept items at the mercantile, Thomas. Sarah's mother had commissioned a quilt from Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house." Sarah grabbed Thomas's arm. "We have to go back to the church. Rebecca's journal. Maybe there's something else, something that tells us how to break the pattern." They ran through the smoking streets, leaving the chaos behind. The church stood untouched on its hill, serene and innocent in the morning light. But Sarah could feel the malevolence beneath that peaceful facade now, the hunger of the land itself. Inside, they searched frantically through Rebecca's belongings, looking for any clue they might have missed. Thomas found it, a loose page tucked into the back of the journal, written in a shaking hand. "There is a way," Rebecca had written. "The native people knew it. A willing sacrifice, not death but renunciation. To break the pattern, you must give up what the land wants most, your joy, your hope, your future together. You must choose to part, to deny the land its feast of happiness turned to sorrow." Sarah read the words twice, then looked at Thomas. His face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination. "No," he said flatly. "We're not doing this. We're not letting some superstitious curse dictate our lives. Thomas, no! We'll leave Millbrook, start over somewhere else, and this will all be behind us. We'll have our life together, the one we planned." But even as he spoke, they heard shouts from outside. Running to the door, they saw flames in the distance. Their house was burning. Sarah's family's farm was burning. The fires were spreading faster than any natural fire should, consuming everything connected to their wedding, their happiness, their future. "It won't stop," Sarah whispered. "Not until it has what it wants, not until we make the choice." Thomas pulled her close, his voice breaking. "There has to be another way." "There isn't. You know there isn't." They stood together in the doorway of St. Michael's, the same spot where they had posed for their wedding photograph. Behind them, through the glass, Sarah could see Rebecca Ashford's reflection, watching, waiting. The choice was impossible. Stay together and watch everything they loved burn. Watch Millbrook consume itself in supernatural fire, knowing they were the cause. Or part ways, renounce their marriage, their love, their future. Save the town, but lose each other. Thomas gripped her hands. If we do this, if we part, I want you to know. Don't, Sarah interrupted, tears streaming down her face. Don't say it. It will only make this harder. In the distance, they could hear more bells ringing, more shouts of alarm. The fire was spreading faster now, feeding on their indecision. We have to choose, Sarah said. Now! Thomas looked at her one final time, memorizing every detail of her face. Then he nodded, releasing her hands. Together they spoke the words that would end their marriage, their union, their shared future. The vows reversed, the promises unmade. With each word, Sarah felt something breaking inside her chest, a pain more intense than any physical wound. The moment they finished speaking, the church bells ceased their tolling. The wind died. In the distance, they could see the fires beginning to diminish, no longer spreading with supernatural fury. Rebecca Ashford's reflection faded from the glass, but for just a moment, Sarah saw something else in her expression. Not triumph, but sorrow, understanding, the acknowledgement of one sacrifice recognizing another. Thomas and Sarah stood together for one last moment, then turned and walked in opposite directions. Thomas toward Philadelphia and the life he would build alone. Sarah toward her family's farm, toward the future she would face without him. Neither looked back. The photograph remained in Thomas's possession for the rest of his life, though he never looked at it again. When he died in 1954, his daughter found it among his effects, the young couple smiling before the church, and in the glass behind them, two faces now, Rebecca Ashford and a young woman who looked remarkably like her. Sarah lived to be 93, dying in 1980. She never remarried. Among her possessions, her grandchildren found Rebecca's journal and a single pressed flower from her wedding bouquet. On the last page of the journal, in Sarah's handwriting, was a single sentence. Some loves are too dangerous to keep, but impossible to forget. St. Michael's Church still stands in Millbrook, and weddings are still held there. But no one gets married on June 3rd. That date is always left open, a tradition that no one quite remembers the reason for, but everyone respects nonetheless. And sometimes, in photographs taken at the church, there are faces in the glass that shouldn't be there, reflections with no source, reminders of sacrifices made and loves lost to save others from the same fate. The mystery remains. Was it truly supernatural, or merely a series of tragic coincidences that broke two hearts? Did the land truly demand its due? Or did fear and superstition destroy what might have been a lifetime of happiness? No one can say for certain, and perhaps that's how some mysteries are meant to remain, unanswered, hovering between the possible and the impossible, a reminder that some forces are beyond our understanding and some prices are too high to pay, even for love. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing your opinions and answering your questions about these mysterious tales. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. More mysteries are coming soon.